Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Over the past 2 days, we've had various sessions of 2021 Seoul Big Data Forum, and we are here for the last session of the forum. As of yesterday, when we looked at the number of clicks for YouTube, more than 2,000 clicks have been recorded as of yesterday. And I believe it was the highest level of clicks registered. Now we are going to have a wrap-up session to look back on the progress and achievements made over the past 2 days, and then we will talk about how to better organize next year's Big Data Forum. And we are joined by the moderators of individual sessions. And we will go over what has been discussed at each session, and then look back on our past to learn the lessons, and then project them forward for future planning. So following the order of session, we would like to ask the session moderators to briefly update us on what has been discussed in the session. First session, Professor Lee Seung-jae of University of Seoul. Yes. Hello, I'm Lee Seung-jae. Nice to meet you again. In the first session, we've had keynote presentations, and Professor Alex Pentland from MIT Lab, and from Sweden we were joined by Professor Bin Zhang of Gavil University. These two professors have made wonderful keynote presentations. And Professor Pentland has said that data is a capital. And we have this capital theory, Adam Smith's national wealth theory. For a nation to be well off, it should accumulate capital. But capital in the past were mainly physical infrastructure or land. But data is now emerging as a new form of capital. So if we can accumulate data, utilize them wisely, we can create a lot of added value, which will create a new industry, which will be the key to successful fourth industrial revolution. And Professor Bin Zhang, he has been participating since the first Big Data Forum. I think it was 3 years ago that Professor Bin Zhang has been delivering keynote speech every year. And he is an expert in urban science, city science. He's a very famous expert, and he has made 3 important points about what data can be used for. First, data can help us understand the structure. Not just the physical structure, but with data, we'll be able to understand the urban structure morphologically. Then, second, we can have glimpse into the urban dynamics. Time, space, people moving around, creating various flows of movement. And we can measure that and optimize that for control and monitoring. Last but not least, he talked about design, what it ought to be. That is the most important part. Structure and dynamics tells us if there is any flaws or problems in the current system. So we need to correct that, resolve that, and come up with more optimized design, and use that as a database to carry out further study. So he made a very important keynote presentation. And in our session 2, the major title was Changes and Reactions to Life in Metropolitan Area After COVID-19. And Professor Lee Hee-jung has talked about the major policy changes in major metropolitan areas around the world like Seoul, New York, Tokyo. So he compared all these metropolitan areas, and then because of the COVID-19 infection risk, people's residency or mobility patterns have changed, and the real estate price in general have gone up because COVID-19 pandemic has created some inflation, and people are trying to reduce their travel and living closer to their work. So megacity region, that is the more expansive spatial concept, and inside that, trips will be minimized, creating the so-called fragmented cities. And Professor Bin Jiang's concept of design and structure and dynamics. And second, Professor Park In-gyu from the University of Seoul has made a presentation about global urban digital model and toy modeling. There are 3 recipients of Nobel Prize this year, and they talked about climate. They did the modeling of global climate change. And
so COVID spread model or twin model he explained, and also Professor Park talked about the importance of living with COVID-19. And if we collaborate, definitely we can create a better result in the future. And then there are 2 additional speakers, Professor Yanden Steik. Sorry, first we had Professor Anda.
Dr. Anda has been participating in this forum from the first year. He used mobile phone signaling data to see how people get infected with the virus based on trajectory, and then how people come into contact in the urban space. Through that kind of encounter leading to infection, through this kind of process, he has analyzed Victorian region in Australia and Singapore. And then last but not least,
and Professor Yanders Smake. He came and joined us Seoul Big Data Forum for a long time, and continuously, you know that COVID-19 confirmed cases fluctuated, and stage by stage we can take the policy response, and depending on policy, sometime the confirmed cases decreases or the COVID-19 spread increases. So applying the statistic model, the professor tried to understand the way to control the COVID-19 confirmed cases, and we need to stimulate the economy. And he talked about Daruma project, which is a special project to monitor the overall trend, and that was quite interesting. And frankly speaking, Korea, Seoul, we need to take note of his presentation because his presentation gave us a lot of implication.
감사합니다.
thank you. So including the keynote session and session 2, Professor Lee has given us a very graphic and detailed summary of those sessions. It's as if we have participated in the sessions ourselves. Now, Director Kim Eun-young from Seoul Digital Foundation, could you summarize your session? Hello, I'm Kim Eun-young from Seoul Digital Foundation. And we have hosted the third session yesterday. The theme was a paradigm shift in cities management based on AI. We have selected AI as a theme because in a complicated large system like Seoul, for it to be operated organically, it's important to analyze the data correctly, but also we should create a lot of intelligent systems. And we've had 4 presentations. Let me briefly go over the presentation. The first presentation was made by Professor Park Jong-yeol from Seoul National University of Science and Technology.
The visual AI technology was introduced by Professor Park. Recently, we have abundant data being created, and in Seoul Metropolitan City, there are a lot of CCTV installed, and we get a lot of image data taken from CCTV. So using visual data and also CCTV photos, how we can utilize that, he introduced that, and the expectations and limitations of the AI were elaborated, how we can apply this, especially Professor Park talked about how we can prevent from people throwing away illegal waste. And CCTV was taken, the photos, and originally we wanted to curtail people from throwing illegal waste and impose penalty, but eventually the reason why we are trying to stop them from throwing the illegal waste is to keep environment clean. And because that's the true sense of purpose, instead of imposing penalty, there were a couple of changes. So he introduced that as well.
빅데이터 AI 기반 지능형 스마트 도시 재난안전 기술에 대해서 소개를 해주셨는데요. 우리 건설 현장의 인명 피해와 같은 그런 사회 재난하고 폭염, 한파, 산불과 같은 자연 재난에 대응을 위한 인공지능의 적용 사례에 대해서 말씀해 주셨습니다. 그리고 최근 디지털 영역에서 굉장히 핫 이슈가 되고 있는 메타버스의 활용에 대해서도 좀 이야기를 해 주셨는데요. 재난 모의 훈련 같은 경우에는 우리가 실제로 재난이 발생해야지만 그 효과를 볼 수 있는, 확인을 할 수 있는 그런 부분인데, 이런 부분을 메타버스의 플랫폼에서 좀 활용할 수 있는 부분이 있지 않을까라는 제안도 해주셨습니다. 그리고 세 번째는 건설기술연구원의 이윤규 단장께서
And the Senior Research Fellow, Lee Young-gyu, has talked about the AI-based indoor air quality prediction and smart city connection plan for multi-use facilities. And then he talked about meta-analysis of indoor air quality and how the outdoor air can be polluted and how we can predict the changes in the indoor air quality. And for this research to evolve, we can continue to expand this to prevent the spread of virus. Last but not least, Principal Manager Park Ji-hye.
How the city building change detection can be effectively used using aerial imagery. Seoul Digital Foundation is building a lot of information so that we can use that as learning information. Especially using aerial imagery, we try to detect how the urban city construction buildings are changing during that process. There could be various issues and challenges, and Principal Manager Park talked about that. That's all.
Thank you very much. And various institutions participating in this forum has selected the appropriate theme and discussion topics for the sessions they have hosted respectively. And Digital Foundation has focused on having in-depth discussions on AI. And today, in the Seoul Institute of Technology session, we focused on metaverse and digital transformation. Seoul Institute of Technology has definitely selected a very interesting topic for discussion. Director Choi Jun-young, can you elaborate on the session 4? In the morning session, we have talked about Metaverse City Seoul, urban changes and responses to the digital transformation. We've had 4 presenters and 4 discussants. They made a lot of interesting points and recommendations. And
in case of Cameo, Dr. Cameo, in order to recover from COVID-19, people-centered technology and people-centered smart city technology must be further developed. And she talked about smart technology, especially in response to post-COVID-19, CCTV or applications or all kinds of devices have gathered information, personal information, and we have effectively responded to COVID-19. And now, since we have accumulated data, how are we going to protect these data? And what about the digital divide? So that was the Camilla's presentation.
And then Dr. Wu talked about digital transformation and how the previous cities and existing cities can benefit from technology evolution and how the physical space is slow to change. And with digitalization, our urban space will expand temporally and physically. And metaverse city. And Professor Na Jung-hyun has talked about digital platform.
From the consumer's perspective, how consumers consume the product in the retail area, we took note that the contactless society still, the metaverse technology, AR, VR, or social network through which we can communicate, all this converged technology can be our foundation. So within the offline, the value can be further developed. And it was quite meaningful.
And Metaverse City has been realistically presented by Director Kim Tae-hyun. Director Kim paid attention to how the existing information can be presented more graphically using these technologies. And then he talked about game engine-based technologies, Unity and Unreal, and Seoul City was realized using Unreal. And such technologies are also connected to MetaHuman, another self-identity created in Metaverse with a little bit of enhancement, looking slightly different or better than your true self. And then, in the discussion session, Professor Jang Dong-sun has talked about the next level internet, which is metaverse. And then how we can take advantage of the advanced technologies which will create digital divide. And then we could use existing public space as a hub of metaverse. He made an interesting recommendations. And Mr. Bang Eun-ju has said that content would be the key to metaverse. And the contents and devices on the metaverse is where the competitiveness will come from. And digital transformation, how we can assess and understand this. From the user's perspective, we can change the degree of, we can measure the degree of changes. And using the 24-hour mobility data, we can look at the increasing portion of online activities. And then we probably need a separate organization to deal with that. And Seoul City is carrying out Seoul type survey, and not just the offline changes, but online changes can be considered. And using delivery apps, we use a lot of apps, but a lot of it is still blank, so we can study these patterns in more detail. And it's something that we need to communicate closely with the big data officer. Thank you. Thank you very much. From the very beginning, I've participated in this forum, and I felt like technology-oriented discussion was going to be very difficult to understand. But during the discussion, I have found many interesting points, stories about our future identity, things that are very close to our heart. And regarding the inequality between cities, I think in the last session, in the afternoon session, I think in the Seoul Institute session, this was dealt in detail.
예,
Well, session 5 was moderated by myself. I am Kim Sang-il from the Seoul Institute. The title of our session is Inequality and Gaps in COVID-19 Affected Cities. We've been wondering what kind of topic we'll choose. One thing that we took note of that is the pandemic and technology transformation and climate changes. So these are the important elements and candidates that we wanted to discuss about. But inequality and gaps created by COVID-19 has been worsened, and we need to prevent that, and we need to achieve sustainable growth. And I believe that the topic of inequality and gaps in COVID-19 could be very meaningful topic. Using big data, how we can narrow down the gap caused by the COVID-19. The first presenter was UN Habitat Senior Human Settlement Officer Bruno Dorcon, and we heard his presentation. It was like a keynote address. He talked about what UN does, what's UN's principle and direction the UN was taking. And Dr. Bruno emphasized that the smart city must be deployed human-centered way, fair, justifiable, environmental friendly, and healthy. Smart city must be realized. So those were the keywords. What's interesting was that during his presentation, he introduced van operator. They got help from the van operator, and the road taken by van operator, they got the information and they actually create a map. And data governance-wise, that was quite interesting. And also in the big data, policy-wise, what kind of information are we pursuing? Actually, the idea that he suggests was very different from what traditionally we think about. And the approach was quite interesting. Well, I myself was very interested.
주셨던
Second presentation was made by Dr. Kim Seung-yeon. And she has talked about the inequality, and NHIC administrative data was utilized to see what's happening to inequality in our income and property. Unfortunately, we still haven't done the comparison between before and after COVID. We have comparison between two periods that are both before COVID-19. We tend to believe that the conclusions show that inequality has been reduced, and inequality in property, it's much more serious than inequality in income. But we've done some nosediving, and any reduction in inequality is the result of changes in taxation policies and a lot of income data being made more transparent, and the income of high income earners are now collected more thoroughly. So we are definitely not conclusive about this, and then we have to do some additional study. And before and after COVID-19, what's happening to the inequality, I asked her about her opinion. And then given the various indices, COVID-19 definitely has enhanced and increased the inequality. And she said she will start related research soon. Next, Dr. Hong Bo-young and Dr. Park Hae-kyung. They both talked about big data, using big data to recognize inequality and using big data to come out with an alternative. Dr. Hong Bo-young did then research based on mobile phone signal data to identify the location of people, combining the location information with a variety of other information to see if this person is at work or at home, or whether outdoors or inside the building. So after doing that kind of classification, the regions can be categorized, and the characteristics of these regions can be reviewed to see how the people's behavior is changing before and after the pandemic, and what kind of impact it has on the economy, social, and demographic aspects of our society, and how the neighborhoods responded differently. And she talked about this exposure density. And her study showed that lower income neighborhoods, in order to survive, they were put at a more difficult situation. They had to go to work to make living. They had to go out to buy things they needed, exposing themselves to more risk. Therefore, there was more infection in those neighborhoods. What was interesting was that because of pandemic, we expected the self-business owners to suffer more because the pandemic would create difficulties for their business. But in the American business, the lower income people were more desperate to work, and they had to face risks, tolerate risk of infection. That was an interesting evidence. And Dr. Park Hae-kyung,
Who work at Seoul Institute, has made a presentations about the SDOT data, how the temperature has been calculated, and especially based on the data that she has gathered. What about the extreme heat wave? Based on this base, she tried to analyze it. And especially the many indicators that expresses like very young aged children or elderly people or a house or really outdated houses. Those are the weak points against the heat wave. And geographically, she tried to analyze that. And the area where the heat wave was most severe, which area should the Seoul Metropolitan Government should come up with the countermeasures within the limited time, and especially the resources are very much limited, which area should receive the highest priority. And I believe her last year's research was actually progressed, and Seoul Metropolitan City is operating city centers, and it can be connected to the policy making.
그 토론자들 분들도
And discussants also made wonderful comments. Let me just share some of them with you. And Dr. Jung Mi talked about regional gaps and how the gaps between cities can be interpreted from a regional framework. And she showed strong interest in such attempt. And Professor Kang Myung-gu said that there should be continued pursuit of this direction in a consistent manner, and should work hard to come out with policy alternatives. Dr. Bruno, let me go back to his comments.
브루노
Dr. Bruno consistently emphasized that in order to respond to the inequality, he talked about the importance of big data, but also he emphasized the importance of the governance. And from the UN's perspective, in each city unit, the data governance or data sovereignty, there are alliances being formed. But in Asia Pacific regions, not a single city is taking part in. And Seoul Metropolitan City needs to pay attention and become the leader in data alliance. And I'm just delivering his message. So in proceeding the session 5, it was very interesting. There are a lot of questions. That's all.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. When we try to deal with social issues like inequality, well, I thought data, big data, and AI, I thought they would help us reveal the hidden cause of inequality, and then I thought they would give us hope in resolving this inequality in the future. So I think it was a session that has actually taken this forum into a deeper level. As we hold more and more forum, I feel like we are upgrading it every year, and the Seoul Metropolitan Governance has participated as one of the co-hosts of Big Data Forum, and that is a major progress. So let us invite Director Lee Soo-jae. And Seoul Metropolitan Government hosted session regarding potential and role of big data after COVID-19. One of the things that we need to consider is the data inequality, and the government needs to play an important role. And Dr. Bruno Durkan has mentioned information gap. Yeah. And if you invite us, we will love to participate, review the possibility of joining alliance. And then we talked about the impact of COVID-19 on vulnerability of commercial areas, and using the citizens' mobility data and how people are traveling in Seoul. What we wanted to find is share some data that can be used, and then talk about data combination that is legally allowed. In September this year, Big Data has shared living mobility data, and Officer Kang Soo-young had made a related presentation. And basically, there are 9 concepts where people start, where people arrive, ODA, origin destination. And she came up with 9 combinations and then analyzed the living pattern. And we identified various characteristics of mobility, difference between travel by male and female and by age groups, why women's mobility declined after the outbreak. And by age group, we looked at where people traveled from where to where. Such data would be very helpful when people are planning to open a business. And Dr. Kim Sang-il also talked about 4 levels of pandemic and how the analysis results can be shared. And he shared the characteristics of each phase. And living mobility data can be utilized for each different phase to come up with how to respond to the pandemic. When the number of cases increase, what kind of message should be shared? And then he gave us some guideline for data. And Mr. Kim Sang-il has shown us various data, how to use that. And we need to continue to evolve network analysis portion as well. And regarding the vulnerability of commercial areas, which it's a very critical piece of information. And after the end of pandemic, well, some people say that we must learn to live with the pandemic. And then we have continuously evolved such analysis. And then Deputy Director Kim Jun-ho has analyzed the trend of credit cards, KCB, SKT, credit cards, data being combined for pseudonym combination. And it is being carried out actively by the private sector, and the public sector is working with Statistics Korea for pseudonym combination. They can offer new insight. And regarding the future direction, Director Yoon Ji-suk, Professor Chang Won-chul, and Professor No Seung-chul, and Chief Manager Park Bo-kyung has talked about how to open the public data and how the combination with pseudonym can create the opportunities and values here. Throughout such discussion, we have talked about how big data can be used in the public sector. For big data, we've had a lot of efforts for looking into the past and the present. So we can do a lot of analysis using the past data so that we can have access to data as soon as possible. From now, we need to create big data that would show both the past, the present, and then we can find more active ways to utilize the big data. Thank you very much.
Well, we had 2 days of seminar, and we've discussed about the performance of the overhaul. About 10 minutes are left until the end of today's seminar. There's one regrettable thing. Maybe what we expect for the 2022 Seoul Big Data Forum. Why don't we take turns and express your views, starting with Professor Lee Seung-jae. Well, next year will be the 4th Seoul Big Data Forum, the keynote speech, and also Joe Biden, President, Build Back Better was his catchphrase. And of course, he talks about the framework, and that law has been passed, so now Build Back Better has become an act. So $1.2 trillion, that's about 1,200 trillion will be invested. And what they are trying to do is the existing infrastructure will become digitalized. And this is extremely important, especially in the 4th Industrial Revolution. The physical things will be strengthened, and through 4th Industrial Revolution, the Pentline professor from the MIT, data will become a capital or asset based on which the United States will be further grow. And the way to develop the country is, as Pinja mentioned, optimization of the data is essential. So since we live in Seoul, metropolitan city, everyone are coming from the Seoul metropolitan related agency. Of course, we can make our own presentation, but instead we take our own research project. Maybe we can do a joint research, and maybe next year we can make a presentation about the joint research. Lee Soo-jae, you talked about right before the presentation, you said that as data and digital twin, everything is in digital twin type. So in relations with that, a lot of data can be gathered, and probably we can come up with the idea so that we can make this big data as an asset or capital, so that Seoul can be a true sense of the exemplary city creating a new economy. That's my hope. And I hope we can take the first step. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you. Seoul Digital Foundation. When I talked about the session, I haven't talked about what the discussants have said. Because of time, I won't be able to elaborate everything, but the most important comments about were whether we are using data analysis or using AI. The data quality must be a precondition. That is a very critical area. And we are making a lot of legislation change, but still it is difficult. Out of 100 to secure data, we are using more than 50% of our efforts. Therefore, since we have the officer responsible for big data, I think it's something that we all need to work together. And next year, for Big Data Forum, we are going to be the main host. And the forum gets better and better every year. And we will do our best to plan a better event next year. I hope next year we can have an offline forum with many participants. And I hope to see you again with more cases. Thank you very much.
네, 서울기술연구원 최준영입니다.
I am Choi Jung-yeon from the Seoul Institute of Technology. Well, this is the third Seoul Big Data Forum co-hosted by our institute and Seoul Digital Foundation, Seoul Institute, and University of Seoul. And of course, we can create synergy as there are 4 organizers joining forces to host Seoul Big Data Forum. But I also believe that we've been talking about joint research, but instead of just talking, I sincerely hope to see the true result of the co-research. And maybe during the next year's Big Data Forum, we can make a presentation about joint research. And I believe if we do that, it will be a more meaningful meeting. This is just an example, but yesterday, Professor Park In-kyu talked about global model, and we can apply that. So complicated and complex data, we can understand the city. For example, we can call it as a Seoul type model. And that's my idea. And when the 4 organizers join forces, we can carry out research. So let's do that in more concrete forms. Second, when we go to a conference, in some cases, we present the new research result, but also through new research, or it could be a joint effort, we can also produce new data. And last September, Seoul Metropolitan City hosted a forum where we were able to show a new data, and I hope that Seoul Big Data Forum can also present a new data. We talked about Seoul type of survey, but when we do the Seoul survey, mostly it was a sample survey, but next time probably we can do a big data or statistic-based survey, and creating a source data is important, but also data-based research could be important, and our analysis result, if it can be shared, it will be more meaningful. Thank you.
감사합니다.
Thank you.
말씀을 많이 드렸는데
I think I've already spoken enough, but I'll be brief. Our institute has organized this year's forum, and I would like to thank everybody for helping us. I know there are some areas where we can improve on, and I will get back to that later on. In this year's forum, I think each institute have expressed their characteristics very well. And participants each year are coming up with more advanced comments. And I hope we can continue that tradition next year. And in today's forum, Dr. Pentland has shown us a picture. Data shouldn't be coming. We should make the code go. Data manipulation. The side that provides the data should be given the computing power so that we can have more raw data. And data codes should give us the output we are looking for. And various data that Seoul City has can prevent data misuse and give us higher level of data access. by building a data sharing system. Thank you very much.
입니다.
Thank you. Yes. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for organizing and also joining the forum. Let me express two views. First, the possibility of extending or expanding the forum itself. Other public agencies and public authorities can join us, especially the brand of Seoul Big Data Forum is extremely high, and I hope that more agencies can join. Maybe we can think about that in the 2022 Seoul Big Data Forum. And next, I thought that Seoul Metropolitan City Government needs to play a greater role, especially in the area of utilizations of the big data. Yes, we need to further make efforts, and people involved in this area, we need to identify which data we really need, which are really important. I really hope to carry out a joint research. Thank you.
감사합니다.
Thank you. When we planned Big Data Forum, we've made several promises. We'll do it every year with the related organizations of the Seoul Metropolitan Government, and that they would take turns hosting this every year. And for continuity, we wanted to have a certain number of people speaking every year and a certain number of new speakers every year. And then joint research should include not just the joint research among the related organizations, but also overseas institutions. But because of the unexpected COVID-19 pandemic, everything moving online, of course, we've had some disadvantages, but it has also brought some advantages. But it's now difficult to collaborate directly with overseas researchers. But we are now talking about metaverse and digital twins, and Seoul Metropolitan Government is actively involved in this. And Big Data Forum with a new mayor we are going to be hosting next year. And big data will play an important role. Digital Foundation will be hosting next year's forum, and I am sure you can have very high expectations. Now we would like to conclude this year's Big Data Forum. Thank you very much for your participation. I would like to thank the technical staff, everybody from all the related institutes for bringing today's forum possible. So let us conclude the wrap-up session. Thank you.